A Carthaginian general named Hannibal marched an army from Spain, through Gaul, and over the Alps mountains. He brought with him 37 war elephants. When he arrived in northern Italy, half his men were dead. The journey had been brutal. But Hannibal had done what Rome thought was impossible. He had brought an army into Italy from the north. For the next 15 years, Hannibal would ravage Roman territory. He would win battle after battle. He would destroy entire Roman armies. And yet, Rome would refuse to surrender. This is the story of how Rome survived its greatest test, and how that survival led Rome to conquer the entire Mediterranean world. By 275 BC, Rome controlled all of Italy. But across the Mediterranean Sea, another great power watched Rome's rise with concern. Carthage. Let me tell you about Carthage, because it was very different from Rome. Carthage was located in North Africa, in what is now Tunisia. It had been founded by Phoenician traders from the eastern Mediterranean, hundreds of years before Rome even existed. Carthage was built on trade. Its ships sailed everywhere. To Spain for silver and tin. To Sicily for grain. To Africa for gold and ivory. Carthaginian merchants were the best sailors in the Mediterranean. The city was incredibly wealthy. Richer than Rome. Its harbor could hold over 200 warships. Its walls were enormous, nearly 40 feet high in some places. But Carthage was not like Rome in one important way. Where Rome's strength came from its citizen soldiers and Italian allies, Carthage relied on hired mercenaries. Men who fought for money, not loyalty. This would matter later. For a long time, Rome and Carthage had no reason to fight. Rome was a land power, controlling Italy. Carthage was a sea power, controlling North Africa and trading posts across the Mediterranean. But then both powers looked at the same place. Sicily. Sicily is a large island just off the coast of Italy. It's fertile, rich in grain. And it sits right in the middle of the Mediterranean, between Italy and North Africa. In 264 BC, a small dispute in Sicily pulled both Rome and Carthage into conflict. Neither side really wanted war. But neither side wanted to back down either. This was the beginning of the First Punic War. Punic was the Roman word for Phoenician, the people who had founded Carthage. There would be 3 Punic Wars in total. They would last, on and off, for over a century. And they would determine who ruled the Mediterranean. The First Punic War immediately showed Rome's biggest problem. Carthage had a powerful navy. Rome had almost no navy at all. Rome was a land power. They had conquered Italy with their legions, their foot soldiers. But you can't march soldiers across the sea. You need ships. And Rome didn't have ships. But here's what Rome did. And this shows you how Rome operated. Roman soldiers captured a Carthaginian warship that had run aground. They studied it carefully. Then they copied it. They built an entire fleet based on this one captured ship. Within 2 months, Rome had built 100 warships. Think about that. Rome had barely any naval experience. But they saw what they needed, they figured out how to do it, and they did it fast. There was a problem though. Roman sailors didn't know how to fight at sea. Carthaginian sailors had generations of experience. In a normal naval battle, Carthage would win easily. So Rome changed how naval battles worked. They invented a new device. A boarding bridge with a large spike on the end. When a Roman ship got close to an enemy ship, they dropped this bridge. The spike stabbed into the enemy deck. Now the ships were locked together. Then Roman soldiers crossed the bridge and fought hand to hand on the enemy deck. Rome had turned sea battles into land battles. And Rome was very good at land battles. This innovation was called the corvus, the raven. And it worked. Rome started winning naval battles against Carthage. The First Punic War dragged on for 23 years. It was fought mostly in Sicily and at sea. Both sides won victories. Both sides suffered terrible losses. In 249 BC, Rome lost an entire fleet in a storm. Over 100 ships sank. 20,000 men drowned. Rome built a new fleet and kept fighting. Finally, in 241 BC, Rome won a decisive naval battle near Sicily. Carthage was exhausted. They couldn't afford to build another fleet. Carthage surrendered. They gave Sicily to Rome. They also agreed to pay Rome a huge amount of money as tribute. Rome had won its first overseas territory. Sicily became Rome's first province, a territory ruled directly by Roman governors. But the war had been brutal. Both sides were exhausted. Both sides had lost hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. And one Carthaginian general, Hamilcar Barca, was not ready to forgive. After the war, Hamilcar took his young son to a temple. He made the boy place his hand on the altar and swear an oath of eternal hatred against Rome. The boy's name was Hannibal. After losing Sicily, Carthage needed new sources of wealth and manpower. Hamilcar Barca went to Spain. He conquered tribes there and built a new Carthaginian empire in Spain. This gave Carthage access to Spanish silver mines and tough Spanish warriors. When Hamilcar died, his son-in-law took over. And when he was assassinated, command passed to Hamilcar's son, Hannibal. Hannibal was 26 years old, but he was brilliant, a tactical genius, and he had been raised on stories of Carthage's defeat and humiliation by Rome. He wanted revenge. In 219 BC, Hannibal attacked a Spanish city called Saguntum. This city was allied with Rome. Rome demanded that Carthage hand Hannibal over for punishment. Carthage refused. The Second Punic War had begun. Rome expected the war to be fought in Spain or North Africa. They prepared to send armies to those places. But Hannibal had a different plan. A bold, crazy plan. He would march from Spain, through Gaul, over the Alps mountains, and invade Italy itself. He would bring the war to Rome's homeland. In 218 BC, Hannibal's army left Spain. He had about 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants. The march through Gaul was difficult. Some Gallic tribes helped him. Others attacked. Hannibal fought his way through. Then came the Alps. The Alps are massive mountains, the highest in Europe. There were no roads through them. Just narrow passes, cliffs, and steep trails. And it was autumn, turning to winter. Hannibal's men climbed through snow and ice. They ran out of food. Men fell off cliffs. Horses lost their footing. Elephants struggled in the cold. It took 15 days to cross the Alps. When Hannibal reached Italy, he had lost half his army. Only 20,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and a few elephants remained. But he was in Italy. And Rome wasn't ready. At first, the Romans weren't too worried. Hannibal's army was small and exhausted. Rome had much larger forces. They sent an army to destroy him. At the Trebia River in northern Italy, the two armies met. It was December, freezing cold. Hannibal tricked the Romans. He lured them across the icy river. While the Romans were cold, wet, and disorganized, Hannibal attacked from the front and sides. The Roman army was destroyed. Thousands of Roman soldiers died in the freezing water. Rome was shocked. But they sent another army. In 217 BC, at Lake Trasimene, Hannibal ambushed the Romans again. He hid his men in the hills around the lake. When the Roman army marched through, Hannibal's forces attacked from all sides. 15,000 Romans died. Another 15,000 were captured. It was a massacre. And still, Rome did not surrender. Rome appointed a dictator, a special leader with absolute power during emergencies. His name was Fabius. And Fabius had a plan. Don't fight Hannibal directly. Shadow his army. Harass his supply lines. attack as foragers, but avoid major battles. This frustrated Hannibal. He wanted a decisive battle, but Fabius wouldn't give him one. The Roman people didn't like this strategy either. They called Fabius a coward. They wanted their army to fight, to win glory. In 216 BC, Rome elected new consuls who promised to destroy Hannibal. They raised the largest army Rome had ever assembled. 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. They marched to meet Hannibal at a place called Cannae, in southern Italy. Hannibal had about 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. He was outnumbered almost 2 to 1. But Hannibal was a genius at tactics. The Battle of Cannae is still studied in military schools today. Let me explain what happened. Hannibal arranged his infantry in a curved line, bulging forward toward the Romans. He put his weakest troops in the center, his strong troops on the sides, his cavalry on the far edges. The Romans attacked in a massive, dense formation. They pushed into Hannibal's center. The center gave way, slowly falling back. The Romans kept pushing forward, thinking they were winning. But this pulled them deeper into Hannibal's formation. Meanwhile, Hannibal's cavalry defeated the Roman cavalry on the sides. Then, instead of chasing them away, the Carthaginian cavalry circled around behind the Roman army. Now the Romans were surrounded. Hannibal's strong infantry on the sides moved in. The cavalry attacked from behind. The center held. The Romans were trapped in a pocket, crushed from all sides. They couldn't maneuver. They couldn't retreat. They could barely fight. It was a slaughter. 50,000 Romans died that day. Another 10,000 were captured. The Roman consul Paulus died fighting. It was Rome's worst military defeat ever. After Cannae, panic spread through Rome. Some allied cities defected to Hannibal. Rome's enemies saw weakness. The Senate debated whether to negotiate with Hannibal. But one senator stood up and said no. Rome does not treat with enemies on Italian soil. Rome would never surrender. The Senate agreed. They would keep fighting. And this is where Rome's system showed its strength. Any other city-state would have collapsed after Cannae. But Rome was not just a city. It was the head of a massive alliance system covering all of Italy. Rome had reserves. Manpower reserves. Military reserves. Economic reserves. Rome began to raise new armies. Not from Rome itself, it didn't have enough men left. But from its Italian allies. Many allies stayed loyal. They provided soldiers food, money. The alliance system that Rome had built over 2 centuries held together. Rome also changed strategy. They went back to Fabius's plan. Avoid direct battle with Hannibal. Harass him. Wear him down. And most importantly, attack Carthage's other territories. Rome sent armies to Spain to attack Carthage's bases there. They sent fleets to raid North Africa. They made alliances with Carthage's enemies. The key was a young Roman general named Publius Cornelius Scipio. Scipio's father and uncle had been killed fighting in Spain. But Scipio believed Rome could win there. When he was only 25 years old, he volunteered to lead the army in Spain. Scipio was different from most Roman generals. He actually studied Hannibal's tactics. He learned from them. He even copied some of them. In Spain, Scipio had success after success. He captured the main Carthaginian base in Spain, New Carthage. He defeated Carthaginian armies. He made alliances with Spanish tribes. By 206 BC, Carthage had lost all of Spain. This cut off Hannibal's reinforcements and supplies. Meanwhile, Hannibal was stuck in southern Italy. He had won every major battle, but he couldn't win the war. He couldn't capture Rome itself. The city's walls were too strong, and Hannibal didn't have siege equipment. His allies in Italy were slowly being reconquered by Rome. His army was getting smaller, not larger. He couldn't get reinforcements from Carthage because Rome controlled the seas. Then Scipio proposed something bold. Instead of fighting Hannibal in Italy, attack Carthage itself. Invade North Africa. In 204 BC, Scipio landed in North Africa with an army. He started ravaging the countryside around Carthage. He defeated Carthaginian armies. He made an alliance with Numidia, Carthage's neighbor and rival. The Carthaginian government panicked. They sent a message to Hannibal in Italy. Come home. Defend Carthage. After 15 years in Italy, Hannibal had to leave. He hadn't lost a single major battle. But he hadn't won the war either. In 202 BC, Hannibal's army met Scipio's army at a place called Zama, in North Africa. For the first time, Hannibal faced a Roman general who understood his tactics. Scipio had studied Hannibal for years. At Zama, Scipio used Hannibal's own strategies against him. He let Hannibal's elephants charge through gaps in his lines. He used his cavalry to circle around and attack from behind, just like Hannibal had done at Cannae. Hannibal lost. For the first time in his career, Hannibal was defeated in a major battle. The Second Punic War was over. Rome had won. Carthage surrendered. The peace terms were harsh. Carthage had to give up all its territory outside of Africa. It had to pay Rome a massive tribute over 50 years. It had to hand over all its war elephants. It had to destroy all but 10 of its warships. And most importantly, Carthage could never make war without Rome's permission. Carthage was broken as a military power. It would remain a wealthy trading city, but it would never threaten Rome again. Or so Rome thought. With Carthage defeated, Rome turned east. The eastern Mediterranean was divided into several kingdoms. These were the remains of Alexander the Great's empire, which had split apart after his death. There was Macedon, controlling Greece. There was the Seleucid Empire, controlling Syria and parts of Asia. There was Ptolemaic Egypt, controlling Egypt and nearby regions. These kingdoms were wealthy. They were cultured. They looked down on Rome as barbarians from the West. Tough fighters perhaps, but unsophisticated. This was a mistake. Rome got involved in the East partly because of alliances. Greek cities asked Rome for help against Macedon. Rome's ally Pergamum asked for help against the Seleucids. But Rome also saw opportunity. These kingdoms were rich, and they were starting to fight each other. In 200 BC, Rome declared war on Macedon. The stated reason was to free the Greek cities from Macedonian control. In 197 BC, at a place called Cynocephaly, a Roman army defeated the Macedonians. The Roman legion proved superior to the Macedonian phalanx. The phalanx was a formation of soldiers with long spears, all packed tightly together. It was very strong from the front. But it was slow and inflexible. The Roman legion was more flexible. It could adapt to terrain. It could maneuver. And it had better swords for close combat. After winning, Rome declared all the Greek cities free. The Greeks celebrated. They thought Rome was liberating them. But Rome kept a military presence in Greece. And Roman generals made it clear that Greek freedom depended on following Rome's wishes. Then King Antiochus of the Seleucid Empire made a mistake. He invaded Greece, thinking Rome would be too busy elsewhere to respond. He was wrong. In 191 BC, Rome defeated Antiochus in Greece. Then in 190 BC, Roman forces crossed into Asia and defeated him again at the Battle of Magnesia. Antiochus had to give up all his territory in Asia Minor. Rome gave most of this land to its ally Pergamum. But the message was clear. Rome could project power anywhere in the Mediterranean. Back in Greece, some cities tried to assert their independence. Macedon tried to regain its power. Rome's patience ran out. In 168 BC, at the Battle of Pydna, Rome crushed the Macedonian army. The Macedonian kingdom was dissolved. It was divided into 4 weak republics, all under Roman control. Thousands of Greeks, who had supported Macedon, were deported to Italy. Among them was a historian named Polybius, who would later write about how Rome conquered the world. In 146 BC, a Greek city called Corinth led a rebellion against Rome. Roman armies marched in, captured Corinth, and destroyed it completely. The men were killed. The women and children were sold into slavery. The city was burned to the ground. This was a message: resist Rome and be destroyed. That same year, 146 BC, something else happened. Something that shows how ruthless Rome could be. Remember Carthage? After the Second Punic War, Carthage had been peaceful. It had no army. It followed all of Rome's rules. It even started to become wealthy again through trade. Some Romans found this worrying. One senator, Cato the Elder, ended every single speech he gave with the same words: Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. It didn't matter what the speech was about. Farming, taxes, anything. Cato always ended with, Carthage must be destroyed. Other senators agreed. They didn't trust Carthage. As long as Carthage existed, it could be a threat. Rome found an excuse to declare war. It was a flimsy excuse, and Carthage tried to comply with every Roman demand. But Rome wanted war. Roman armies besieged Carthage. The siege lasted 3 years. The Carthaginians fought desperately. They knew they were fighting for survival. But in 146 BC, Roman forces finally broke into the city. They fought street by street, house by house. When it was over, the city was burned. The survivors were enslaved. According to legend, Roman soldiers plowed salt into the ruins so nothing would grow there again. This probably didn't happen, but the story shows what Romans wanted people to believe. Resist Rome, and not only will you be destroyed, but your very memory will be erased. In the span of just over a century, Rome had defeated the two greatest powers in the Western Mediterranean. Carthage was destroyed. Greece was conquered. Rome also controlled Spain. Those Spanish tribes would resist for many more years. Rome controlled the islands of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. Rome had alliances with kingdoms in Asia Minor, and influence over Egypt. By 146 BC, Rome was the undisputed superpower of the Mediterranean world. But this rapid conquest came with problems. First, there was the question of how to govern all this territory. Rome's republican system was designed for a city-state, not an empire. Roman governors, called proconsuls, ruled the provinces. But they were often corrupt, taking bribes and stealing from the locals. Second, there was massive wealth pouring into Rome. Gold, silver, slaves, grain, luxury goods. This wealth didn't spread evenly. Senators and wealthy families got richer. Common farmers got poorer. Many small farmers had been away fighting in Rome's wars for years. When they came home, their farms had failed. They couldn't compete with rich landowners who used cheap slave labor on huge estates. So poor Romans moved to the city, looking for work. But there wasn't much work. Rome was filling with poor, unemployed citizens. This would cause problems. Third, the Roman army was changing. Before, Roman soldiers were citizen farmers, who fought for a season and went home. Now, wars were longer and farther away. Soldiers spent years, or even decades away from Italy. These soldiers became loyal to their generals, who gave them land and plunder, rather than to Rome itself. This would eventually tear the Republic apart. Fourth, there was the cultural impact. Greece was conquered militarily, but Greek culture conquered Rome culturally. Wealthy Romans became fascinated with Greek art, literature, philosophy, and luxury. Greek tutors taught Roman children. Greek statues filled Roman homes. Greek plays were performed in Rome. Some Romans thought this was wonderful. Others thought it was corrupting Roman values. They thought Romans were becoming soft and decadent. And finally, there was the simple question of ambition. Rome's generals had conquered the world. They had enormous wealth and power. They commanded loyal armies. They were treated like kings in the provinces. When they came back to Rome, they were just senators among many. They had to share power. They had to follow the rules of the Republic. Some of them didn't like that. The seeds of the Republic's destruction were already planted. The conquest that made Rome an empire would eventually destroy the Republic itself. But that crisis was still in the future. Let's think about what we've learned. In the span of about 150 years, Rome went from controlling just Italy to controlling the entire Mediterranean world. Rome survived a war with Hannibal, one of history's greatest generals. A war that should have destroyed Rome. But Rome's alliance system held together. Rome refused to surrender. And Rome learned from its defeats and came back stronger. Rome defeated Carthage, a wealthy naval empire. Rome built a navy from nothing and learned to fight at sea. Rome set armies to attack Carthage's home territory. Rome was ruthless in victory, destroying Carthage completely when it had the chance. Rome conquered the wealthy kingdoms of the East. Greek culture was older and more sophisticated, but Roman legions were stronger. Rome proved that military power matters more than cultural prestige. But Rome didn't just conquer through military might. Rome was smart. It made alliances. It divided its enemies. It used diplomacy alongside force. And it was patient. Rome could lose battles and keep fighting. Rome could wait years for the right opportunity. Rome was also brutal. Cities that resisted were destroyed. Rebels were crucified or enslaved. Rome wanted everyone to know the price of defying Rome. By the mid-2nd century BC, Rome ruled the Mediterranean. All roads led to Rome. As the saying would go, all wealth flowed to Rome. All power came from Rome. But this enormous empire would change Rome itself. The republic that had conquered the world was about to face its greatest test. Not from foreign enemies, but from within. Because the same military power that defeated Carthage and Greece would soon turn against Rome itself. The same generals who conquered provinces would fight each other for control of Rome. The Republic had survived foreign wars. But it would not survive success. The age of civil wars was coming. The age of warlords. And from those wars, one man would emerge to reshape Rome completely. His name was Julius Caesar. But that is a story for next time.